UK supermarkets deliberately put essential items at the back of the store, the things you actually came in for. That's not poor design, it's a tactic. Because the longer you walk, the more shelves you pass, and the more you buy without planning to. And that's just one of the ways you're being quietly scammed every single week. Most shoppers never question it. They just assume that's how supermarkets work. I started paying attention to the habits supermarkets rely on, and once you see them, you can't unsee them. In this video, I'm breaking down 7 habits UK supermarkets count on to quietly scam you. Most people watching this are falling for at least 3 of them every single week, and by the time we reach number 1, you'll understand why shopping will never feel the same again. Time to shop like you know the game. Starting with number 7. 7. Just popping in costs you more than you think. It usually starts with you telling yourself you're not doing a full shop. You're just popping in for one thing. Maybe milk ran out, maybe you need bread, maybe dinner plans changed at the last minute. Because it feels small and harmless, you don't bother writing a list or thinking it through. You assume you'll be in and out in a few minutes. That mindset is exactly what UK supermarkets are counting on. Supermarkets are not designed for people who know exactly what they want and leave. They're designed for people who wander. That's why the most basic items, milk, eggs, bread, are rarely near the entrance. They're pushed to the back or the far corners of the store on purpose. To get what you came for, you have to walk past aisle after aisle of snacks, drinks, promotions, and discounted items you never intended to buy. Every extra step exposes you to more products. Every extra shelf increases the chance that something catches your eye. You didn't come in planning to buy crisps, but now they're right in front of you, on offer, at eye level, easy to justify, and because you didn't mentally prepare to say no, saying, "Why not?" feels harmless in the moment. By the time you reach the checkout, your basket looks very different from what you planned. A £3 stop quietly turns into 20. And the most dangerous part is what happens next. You blame yourself. You tell yourself you were careless or had no willpower, when in reality, this outcome was predictable. UK supermarkets know that unplanned trips are far more profitable than planned ones. That's why they encourage quick shops, express stores, and convenience layouts. The less prepared you are, the more money you tend to spend. Not because you're bad with money, but because the environment is built to take advantage of that exact situation. And if you think walking in without a plan is expensive, the next habit is even worse, because it convinces you that you're saving money when you're actually spending more. 6. You trust deals without realizing how they're framed. When you walk into a UK supermarket, one of the first things your eyes are drawn to is colour. Bright yellow labels, red price tags, big bold numbers telling you something is on offer. Over time, you're trained to associate these signals with savings. You see a deal and you relax. You assume the supermarket is doing you a favor. That assumption is exactly what this habit relies on. One of the most common tactics is price anchoring. You're shown a higher was price next to a lower now price, and your brain immediately focuses on the difference between the two. You feel like you're winning, but what often goes unnoticed is whether that higher price was ever the real long-term price in the first place. In many cases, it was used briefly or strategically, so the reduction looks more dramatic than it really is. Then there are multi-buy offers. 2 for £5 sounds reasonable, even smart, until you stop and think about whether you needed 2 at all. Most of the time you didn't. You came in for one item, but the deal reframes the decision. Suddenly buying just one feels like missing out, and spending more feels justified. You're no longer asking, "Do I need this?" You're asking, "Do I want to waste the deal?" Loyalty pricing adds another layer. Club card prices and member-only discounts make you feel rewarded for belonging, even though the lower price is often just what the item used to cost anyway. Over time, this changes your sense of what's normal. Prices creep up slowly, but because you're focused on unlocking the discounts, you don't notice how much more you're paying compared to a few years ago. What makes this habit so effective is that it doesn't feel manipulative. It feels responsible. It feels like you're being careful with money, and that feeling can override logic very easily, especially when you're moving quickly or shopping on autopilot. By the end of the shop, you may have bought extra items you didn't plan for, spent more than intended, and still still. Walked out feeling like you've saved money. That's the quiet success of the system. The supermarket doesn't need you to be tricked every time. It just needs you to trust the signals often enough. And this gets even more powerful when you're tired or hungry, because that's when your ability to question these deals drops sharply. That's where the next habit comes in. 5. Shopping when you're tired, hungry, or under pressure. Think about the last time you went food shopping. It probably wasn't when you felt calm, rested, and organized. For most people in the UK, shopping happens after work, between responsibilities, or late in the evening when energy is already low. At that point, the goal isn't to make perfect choices, it's to get through the shop as quickly as possible. That's the moment supermarkets quietly benefit from the most. When you're tired or hungry, your brain naturally looks for shortcuts. Instead of carefully weighing options, you're drawn toward foods that feel comforting, filling, or instantly satisfying. Ready meals, snacks, bakery items, and heavily processed foods become far more appealing because they promise ease. These are also the products with the highest profit margins, which is why they're always easy to find. Mental fatigue plays a bigger role than people realize. After a long day, your ability to question pricing, read labels, or compare options drops sharply. You're more likely to rely on habits and visual cues rather than logic. Something familiar feels safe. Something quick feels sensible. Something indulgent feels deserved. The store layout supports this behavior. Fresh ingredients often require more effort, more walking, more decision-making, and more time. Meanwhile, the easiest options are positioned where tired shoppers naturally slow down or stop. It's not about forcing you to buy junk food. It's about making it the path of least resistance when your energy is low. Over time, this habit becomes expensive in ways that aren't immediately obvious. A few tired shops here and there don't feel significant, but they add up. You spend more money overall, bring home food you didn't plan for, and slowly drift away from the way you intended to eat or budget. This isn't a failure of discipline, it's a predictable response to exhaustion, and one supermarkets have learned to rely on. If you think this only affects what you buy, wait until you notice how much of it is influenced before you even reach for a product, because the next habit doesn't target your hunger, it targets your senses. 4. You don't realize your senses are being used against you. When people think about being misled in a supermarket, they usually think about prices or promotions. Very few stop to consider how much of their behavior is influenced before they even look at a label. But UK supermarkets invest heavily in designing how the store feels, because feelings guide decisions long before logic steps in. Take smell, for example. The warm scent of bread near the entrance or bakery section isn't there by accident. Smell is strongly linked to memory and emotion. It creates a sense of comfort and familiarity, which immediately lowers your guard. When you feel relaxed, you slow down. When you slow down, you browse more, and the longer you browse, the more likely you are to buy things you never planned to. Music works the same way. Most supermarkets use slow, steady background music to subtly control your pace. You don't consciously notice it, but your walking speed changes. You linger longer in aisles, spend more time looking at shelves, and make more impulse decisions simply because you're there longer than intended. Lighting and colour also play a role. Warm lighting can make packaged food look fresher and more appealing. Green tones suggest health and freshness. Soft lighting reduces tension and makes products feel more trustworthy in the moment. Even the physical design under your feet matters. Subtle changes in flooring texture can cause shoppers to slow down naturally in certain areas, especially where higher margin products are placed. You might not realize why you stopped, but your body reacts before your mind does. This is the kind of thing most people never notice, and that's why liking this video and subscribing helps. Moving on. What makes this habit so effective is that it never feels forceful. There's no pressure, no salesperson, no obvious manipulation. You just feel comfortable, and comfort lowers resistance. You question less, compare less, and trust more. Even after your senses have been softened and your guard lowered, there's still one thing most shoppers trust without hesitation: the words printed on the front of the packaging. That's where the next habit comes in. 3. You trust healthy-sounding labels instead of what's actually inside. When you're standing in a supermarket aisle trying to make a decent choice, the front of the package feels like a shortcut. You don't have time to analyze every ingredient, so you rely on words that signal safety. Organic, plant-based, whole grain, high protein, low fat. These labels feel reassuring, especially when you're trying to eat better or shop responsibly. UK supermarkets understand this instinct very well, which is why those words are printed large and placed front and centre. The problem is that front-of-pack language is designed to influence how you feel, not to explain how the food is made. Many products that look healthy on the outside are still heavily processed on the inside. They can be packed with added sugars, refined starches, flavour enhancers, and industrial seed oils, things you wouldn't recognise as food if you saw them listed plainly. Take whole grain products as an example. They're often marketed as a healthier alternative, but many are made from grains that have been ground into fine flour, stripping away much of their natural structure. Once processed, they behave very differently in the body than whole grains you'd cook at home. To compensate, manufacturers often add synthetic vitamins back in, giving the impression of nutrition without delivering it in a natural form. Plant-based labels create a similar illusion. The term suggests simplicity and health, but many plant-based ready meals and snacks are among the most processed products in the store. They rely on long ingredient lists, stabilizers, emulsifiers, and flavorings to recreate taste and texture. The label focuses on what's missing, meat or dairy, while quietly ignoring everything that's been added. Even organic can be misleading. Organic sugar is still sugar. Organic refined flour is still refined flour. You often pay more not for a fundamentally better product, but for the comfort of believing you've made a smarter choice. This habit works because it reduces effort. Reading ingredient lists takes time and concentration. Trusting a few reassuring words feels efficient. Over time, you start outsourcing your judgment to packaging instead of engaging with what you're actually buying. The result is subtle but powerful. You leave the shop believing you've chosen something healthier, while your trolley fills with foods that don't truly match that intention. That disconnect benefits supermarkets and brands, not you. Once you reach the end of the shop, when your patience is wearing thin and you're ready to leave, there's one final area designed to catch you at your weakest moment. That's where the next habit takes over. 2. You lose control right at the checkout. By the time you reach the checkout, you're mentally finished. You've already made dozens of decisions: what to buy, what to skip, which brand is cheaper, which offer is worth it. Even if the shop was short, your brain is tired. At that point, you're no longer analysing. You just want to pay and leave. That exact moment is where UK supermarkets make some of their easiest money. Checkout areas are some of the most carefully planned parts of the entire store. They aren't filled with random items. They're stocked with products that are cheap to produce, highly profitable, and easy to justify in the moment. Chocolate bars, sweets, crisps, chewing gum, energy drinks, items that don't feel like real purchases, even though they add up quickly over time. Waiting makes the situation worse. Whether you're standing in a queue or stuck at a self-checkout dealing with unexpected errors, boredom and mild frustration start to creep in. When that happens, your brain looks for a small distraction or reward. Picking up a snack feels harmless. Compared to everything already in your basket, it seems insignificant. That's the trick. Small purchases feel invisible next to a larger total. You've already spent money, so one extra item barely registers emotionally. Supermarkets don't need you to make one big mistake. They rely on lots of tiny ones. Over weeks and months, those just this once moments quietly inflate how much you spend on food. Self-checkouts have made this even more effective. When you're scanning your own items, your attention is on the screen, the barcode, and getting through the process smoothly. You're not fully aware of what's around you. Grabbing something at the last second feels spontaneous, almost accidental. Because it wasn't planned, it doesn't feel like a real decision, which makes it easier to excuse. What makes this habit especially powerful is that it rarely feels like manipulation. You don't leave the shop thinking you were pressured. You barely remember making the choice at all. The item just ended up in your bag. Over time, these impulse purchases become routine. They slip under your awareness, but they never slip under the supermarket's profit calculations. The checkout works not because it forces you to buy, but because it catches you when you're least likely to resist. And once you step back and look at all these habits together, one uncomfortable truth starts to emerge. None of this is accidental. It's all built on a much bigger idea about what supermarkets really are, and that's what the final habit exposes. 1. You think supermarkets exist to feed you well. Most people never question why supermarkets look the way they do. You walk in assuming the shelves represent what people need, that more choice means better choice, and that the store's job is simply to offer food and let you decide. It feels neutral, familiar, almost comforting. That assumption is the foundation everything else depends on. Modern UK supermarkets are not designed around nourishment, balance, or health. They are designed around profitability per square meter. Every aisle, every shelf, and every product position has been negotiated. Shelf space is effectively rented. Brands pay to be placed where your eyes naturally land, where your hands reach without thinking, and where you're most likely to grab something quickly. This is why ultra-processed foods dominate the store. They last longer, cost less to produce, and generate far higher margins than fresh, simple foods. A packaged snack or ready meal can sit on a shelf for months and still deliver profit. Fresh food can't do that. So over time, the store quietly fills with what earns the most, not what nourishes the most. Fresh, whole foods are usually pushed to the edges of the shop. They often require more walking, more effort, and more intention to buy. That isn't accidental. The layout teaches you subtly what deserves attention and what doesn't. The more often you see something, the more normal it feels. Eventually, highly processed food starts to look like everyday food, simply because it's everywhere. There's another layer most shoppers never see. Supermarkets make a significant amount of money from placement deals, promotions, and brand partnerships. Products aren't just sold to you. You are sold to brands. Your habits, your routines, and your predictability are what make those deals valuable. When you walk in at the same time every week, take the same route, and buy similar things, the system works perfectly. What makes this habit so powerful is trust. You don't walk into a supermarket feeling defensive. You don't assume manipulation. You assume the environment is there to serve you. That trust allows every other tactic to work quietly. The layout, the deals, the sensory cues, the checkout traps. None of them would be nearly as effective if you question the purpose of the space itself. Once this clicks, the experience changes. You stop asking, "What should I buy today?" and start asking, "Why is this here, in this spot, at this price?" You begin to see the store less as a helper and more as a system designed to guide behavior in profitable directions. This doesn't mean supermarkets are villains or that everything on the shelf is bad, but it does mean the system is not neutral. It's built around predictable human behavior, and it relies on you never stopping to notice that. How to avoid getting scammed by UK supermarkets. Once you understand how supermarkets actually operate, the goal isn't to feel angry every time you shop or to avoid supermarkets altogether. That's unrealistic. The real goal is to stop moving through them on autopilot. These systems don't work because you're careless. They work because most people are distracted, tired, and trusting. Awareness is what breaks that cycle. The most effective thing you can do is decide before you enter. Walking into a supermarket without a clear plan hands control over to the environment. A written list isn't about discipline, it's about direction. When you know exactly what you came in for, your attention narrows and everything else becomes easier to ignore. You're no longer reacting to what's around you. You're executing a decision you already made. Timing also matters far more than people realize. Shopping when you're hungry, exhausted, or under pressure makes you vulnerable to convenience and impulse. In those moments, the supermarket's design does most of the thinking for you. Even small changes help. Eating beforehand, shopping earlier in the day, or choosing a quieter time can dramatically change what ends up in your basket. Another useful shift is learning where to spend your energy. Supermarkets are designed to slow you down everywhere, but you don't need to comply. Move deliberately through areas you don't need. Don't browse out of habit. When you do stop, make it intentional. The less time you spend wandering, the fewer chances the store has to steer your decisions. Deals deserve scrutiny, not trust. A discount only saves money if you plan to buy the item anyway. If it wasn't on your list, the deal didn't help you, it persuaded you. Asking one simple question, would I still buy this if it wasn't on offer, filters out most unnecessary purchases instantly. Unit prices are often more revealing than promotional labels. Packaging. Language should always be treated with caution. Words on the front of the pack are there to make you feel confident, not informed. The ingredient list is where the truth lives. You don't need to be an expert, just notice patterns. Long lists on familiar names and repeated forms of sugar or starch are signals that the product is doing a lot of work to appear better than it is. The checkout is another area where preparation helps. Go in assuming everything there is designed to tempt you when your patience is gone. If you decide in advance that checkout items are automatic no's, the decision is already made before temptation appears. That single boundary can save more money over time than people expect. Most importantly, change how you see the supermarket itself. It isn't a neutral space, and it isn't there to guide you toward better choices. It's a system built around profit and predictable human behavior. That doesn't make it evil, but it does mean it isn't on your side by default. Once you accept that, something shifts. You stop feeling rushed. You stop feeling guilty. You stop blaming yourself for outcomes that were engineered. You shop with intention instead of reaction, and that alone changes the experience. If this video made you notice even one habit you want to change, share it with someone you shop with. These tactics lose power when people recognize them. And if you want more breakdowns like this, subscribe, because the more you understand the systems around you, the harder they are to use against you.